Welcome back to Robot Roundup. Today we're making an egg bot. Basically a walking Easter egg, but we'll add a little flair to it. Ready? Let's go. Chicken eggs may sometimes be in shortage, but fortunately plastic eggs are rather abundant, especially around Easter time. So I stocked up on some clearance sales this year. I think it's a really fun shape. They come in lots of different sizes, especially I like these really small ones. I'm gonna have to do something with these soon. But for this model, I think this egg is a perfect size. For the feet, I'm using the same plastic capsule pieces I used in my Marduk build. I drilled out a hole for the eye using a Forstner bit. I added thick wire arms and legs and then filled the inside seam with epoxy, which creates a strong bond. And then I scored another seam line around the top edge and on the feet pieces. I put together some random bits to make an eye. On the back side is the spout from a soy sauce bottle, which looks like a cool optical mechanism. I have a bunch of caps and circular pieces, and I put them together until I find matching shapes. I also have a bunch of glass lenses of different sizes, which I think creates a cool effect when it magnifies the inside components. I made the hands out of wire and some wooden beads. The wood is easy to drill, sand, and reshape. It's a tip I got from Bill Making Stuff. He's really awesome at making BeadBots, so check those out. I make sure the left and right hands are the same size when I trim the finger wires.
Now there are two of them.
I did a quick test fit to make sure I liked the proportions. Then I added thumb wires into the bead's existing holes and used epoxy putty as a filler. And then, being as sloppy as possible, I glued caps onto the finger wires. I didn't want to use super glue because I wasn't sure it would hold on this kind of plastic, so I used a different glue. And luckily, the caps covered the giant, nasty glue globs. I primed it with black. Now I'm adding some rivets. I start by marking out where I want the rivets to go. I use a compass divider to lightly scribe marks into the paint. Then I go over those marks with silver marker. This lets me visualize the rivet placement. If I'm happy with the interval, then it's easy to just glue them on. For this build, I'm using rhinestones as rivets. They're fairly inexpensive, and I like the effect they create. Sometimes they come with a little tray that makes it easier to work with them. You can also find rhinestone kits that come with a handy little wax tip stylus. You just add some wax to the tip and then you can dab them out of the tray. This is riveting, I know. I wanted to add a cast iron texture, so I used Mr. Surfacer 500.
Howdy.
Which is like a thick, gooey paint. Except that mine was a bit dried out, so I added some lacquer thinner, which gave it a new life. This technique works well with a worn-out paintbrush. I just dabbed it on and built it up in layers. I avoided the rivets and seam line because I didn't want to cover up any detail. This was the finished texture, although it was starting to remind me of E.T. when he's sick and dying. Not to worry though, another layer of primer will tie it all back together. Now I'm mixing some 2-part Aves Fix-It Sculpt, which is an epoxy putty. After thoroughly mixing the 2 parts, I wrap a thin snake of putty around the eye, and then I texture it to look like a welding seam. Yeah, here we go. The texture's looking great after another coat of primer. Forgot to add a mouth earlier, so I'm adding some tube slices. Except that I managed to do most of it off camera. For the paint job, I built up several layers of dry brushing. First up was Tamiya Dark Iron, which is like a metallic brown gray. But it looked a little bit too much like an avocado. So I added some metallic gray, which is like a gunmetal color. Then I added a little silver highlights. Truth be told, I used too much silver and ended up having to redo some of the paint job. I painted the inside of the eye with liquid chrome. This stuff is amazing. I added wire coils over the arm and leg wires. I go over this in more detail in my Marduk video. Except that after adding the leg and arm coils, it's no longer balanced and it won't stand up on its own anymore. So to keep the pose I want, I'm going to have to make a base for it, which I already did. This video was getting long, so look for a separate one that covers creating the cobblestone base. Thanks for watching. Robots rule, and so do you. See you at the next roundup.